every freedom comes with a responsibility. So if you have the freedom to vote, then you have the responsibility to be an informed voter.
And boom, we're live. What's up, everybody? Couple Casuals Podcast. I am your host, Stefano, and we got a good one for you guys today. My guest today is the host of the Blender Report, where news meets rational thinking. He is a bold Canadian voice that is challenging the narratives with conviction. And guys, he is a big proponent of a very important thing called truth. And guys, today's conversation is brought to you by Canada First. Secure your home with Canada's best home fortification. Visit them at canadafirst.com to learn more. And so with that being said, guys, I want to welcome Liam DeBoer to the conversation.
Thank you, Stefano.
Glad
to be here.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you making the trip down. I know you're from Orangeville, like we were just talking about. Spending the day here in the city of Toronto. It's got a little bit of a different change in the past couple of years, would you say?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I used to live here. I spent about 4 or 5 years pre-COVID. Then I moved back to where I grew up in with a buddy for about a year during the height of it, because there was no way I wanted to be in the city during lockdowns and all that. And then moved back afterwards, but instantly regretted it. As soon as I moved back, I spent about another year and a half, 2 years here after COVID. I think I moved back 2023. But yeah, instantly I was like, oh, this is the same.
I love talking about that with folks when they come on, because you see the change from where it was at one certain point to where it is today. And I love to get people's perspective on it, because it's just mind-boggling to me. Every time I drive into the city, the traffic's insane. When you're here at nighttime, you don't feel safe. And I think that kind of represents a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today. There's so much things I want to get into with you. Like I was saying in the intro, I think you're a bold Canadian voice that's challenging the narratives with conviction. And it's very important, man. We need voices like yours, like Jonathan's, what you guys are doing over there at the Blender Report. Man, it's an amazing job.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, we've been trying to move the needle, but slowly getting there.
It takes time, eh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, a lot of legwork.
Fighting the good fight, as they say. It can be exhausting. I think that's probably where we start with the political conversation. When did politics enter your life? Because I always get curious to ask people, like I had my political interest story and sort of how that unfolded. But what drew you to politics to make you interested in the political conversation, and how did that engagement sort of begin for you?
I mean, when public policy completely ruins a avenue that you've been chasing for a decade, you start to ask yourself why. Just because I was in music, I'd always wanted to make my way through the music industry. And then actually about a month before COVID, before the first lockdowns in March, a month before that in February, I had just got an amazing opportunity that I've been working towards for a long time. I had a band, and so I'd always done music production and all of that as well. But then I had just gotten the gig as a live music director for a venue in Toronto that would have been able to have about 400 or 500 people. So we would have been able to do some decent sizable shows there, and I would have been in charge of the booking and all of that kind of stuff. And so that's what I had wanted to do with my entire life. And then once I saw lockdowns go on for, it was about 6 months to a year, somewhere in that time period, I was like, there's something going on here. And then that's when I was just like, all right, do I need to abandon my music passion? Because obviously live events and all of that were non-existent at the time. So for me, it became a matter of, what is the landscape here? Do I need to make a life choice pivot? And then I realized, we're definitely being lied to on this front. This isn't just going to be another 2-3 months until things go back to normal. And then once I saw that on the line, then I realized, all right, need to make a pivot. And that's when, things changed.
So prior to that, no interest in politics?
Loosely, but I'd say I was more interested in philosophy, history, that kind of stuff. But I would never get deep into the weeds with it. It's funny. I grew up in a very normal family and household. Still to this day, we don't talk about politics.
Really? So growing up, no conversations of politics, eh?
No, not really. Like, I mean, maybe the odd one when something big would happen in the news or something would come up at the table. But we never got into arguments over that kind of stuff, never debates. We never even really just thought about it. I don't know. We kind of had that very stereotypical, normal family.
Dude, I would love to see some data on how much people got interested in politics or started to pay attention following COVID.
Oh, for sure. It became everything after that. And that's where, well, and that's why I started paying attention to the current events of politics, is because I was very interested in history, and particularly totalitarian history. So what would happen in these societies with the Soviet Union, with communist China, with Nazi Germany, all of these kind of things. It was just such a mind-boggling question to me of like, what happened to these societies where they went insane?
Yes.
And so I was always loosely interested in that before what happened during COVID. But once it became that, then it was like, oh, I'm paying attention to this stuff and how it's unfolding today, because I could just see the writing on the wall that I was like, oh, this is very much a similar function. It's different. Like each one of those is very different from the other, those societies. But a lot of the core function I realized this is the same machinery.
For sure. Yeah, we see the similarities, especially through COVID. It was like kind of a double-edged sword. It's like, it's good that people are paying attention now and actually, taking interest and trying to do something about it. But it's bad that you have to go through that sort of, scrutiny and just succumbing to the overarching government that we had to in order to get interested in politics. But I guess when things happen, it's when people pay attention, right?
For sure.
That's the unfortunate part. Sometimes bad things need to happen in order for us to pay attention. And I have a similar story too. It was a little bit earlier, but around the time that Jordan Peterson was challenging Bill C. I forget what the bill was. Bill C. Yeah, the
compelled speech
law. The compelled speech laws. Around that time, it was like 2016. I was paying attention to his lectures, and I was really paying attention to him for the psychological side of things, the educational side of things. And then I saw all this noise happening on the universities. I'm like, what the frig is going on there? Like, what? They want to make you do this? They want to make you say this? And then the conundrum and the deep-rooted just unbelievableness of some of these things, it just sort of unfolded for me. So that kind of leads me to like what I want to ask you about how do you think that like the makeup of politics for the average individual, how do you think people make their political identity? Is it values? Is it influence? Is it the media, relationships? What is your take on how people like construct their political opinion?
I think it's very multifaceted, so very complex. But I do think people's political opinions and beliefs are more a outgrowth of their character than they are necessarily conclusions that they've come to and drawn and say gone through, questioned themselves logically and came to from a more rational standpoint. I think it is more emotional, more tribal for most people.
Right.
It's interesting too. Like you look at these figures throughout history that studied this kind of stuff a lot, like Aristotle. Yeah, he thought that, for instance, the people that always pushed for revolution and change, it was always coming from an internal place. But you look at certain people throughout history that have definitely changed the landscape on the political front, like Karl Marx is one of them. He's an excellent example of this, where people kind of create political beliefs in order to justify, say, their emotions, where he couldn't hold a job. He was always leeching off his family members. He was in debt. He couldn't provide for his family. He was just an unpleasant dude to be around. But then, undeniably brilliant, very, very intelligent, but then creates this entire political philosophy, Marxism, right? That essentially, if you boil it down, I'm oversimplifying things here, but gives him this out for why his life is completely trash.
That's the irony of it. And it's so similar to like what you see today, especially we talked about the universities, right? Like Jordan Peterson says, like going back to him, your room isn't even clean, but they're out there trying to fight the social makeups and fabrics of the world. It's a testament to him. And there's been such a rise in Marxism in present day. Isn't that?
Well, I think it's a very, you brought up Peterson. One of the things that he's outlined, and actually there's an excellent book on this by a guy named Paul Kengor as well, called The Devil and Karl Marx. But kind of they go back to this very kind of primordial almost spiritual belief in what Marx was doing or what we see today, where it's really just this spirit of revenge.
Right.
It's he kind of essentially took this. It's actually, yeah, you even go read back to guys like Dostoevsky in Russia. He was talking about this stuff before Marx and Marxism, how there was just this kind of societal, societal belief, emotion starting to brew through people about that kind of resentfulness and the bitterness and kind of wanting to tear it all down or smash capitalism, all this kind of stuff that we see, kind of just revenge against the world. But then Marx came along and kind of almost gave it a doctrine, like spoke to the masses that were feeling this emotion and said, this is why you're feeling that
Something
emotion.
to resonate with.
And then, so it's kind of like this spirit, of resentment and revenge. And that's a tale as old as time.
Yeah, it's sort of, I guess in a nutshell, oppressor versus oppressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In a way. Yeah, it seems to be really running through our culture today. And I think you hit the nail on the head with people are identifying with it. It gives them a purpose. It gives them motivation. It gives them, this is why. Mm-hmm. This is why I feel this way. This is why this is happening.
If someone was to break into my house, honestly, I wouldn't know what to do. That's something I hear often. And my response, well, don't let them break in. I'm Chad, former RCMP. Did you know that there's an average of 6 home invasions in the Greater Toronto Area daily? At Canada First, we deliver a home defense audit. We find your weak points and we show you how to prevent break-ins. We are here to fortify your home and stop intruders before they even try. Protect your home and what matters most with Canada First. Book your free home defense audit now.
It's just unbelievable to see some of the things that are happening, and it's unfortunate, which we'll talk about more. But would you identify as conservative? Is that what you would identify at present day, or how would you identify politically?
It's funny when I read back in kind of foundational thinkers, I definitely align more with a lot of the classic liberals, like these John Stuart Mill types, John Locke, Thomas Paine, all of these guys that were kind of foundational, like Enlightenment, and that kind of crafted the modern West that we have today, the foundations of it. I see very eye to eye with a lot of those people, but it's in the 1930s in the West, things kind of changed in terms of the big movement at that time was FDR and the New Deal down in America. And what happened was you had a lot of socialist types start to make their way into the democratic apparatus, the quote-unquote liberal side. And then it's funny, actually, libertarianism became an offshoot from that. Guys like Frederick Hayek, these economic thinkers and stuff, they were the classic liberals. But then once the socialists started taking over that mantle of liberalism, then they were like, well, we need to separate ourselves from this movement because we're not actually aligned with these people anymore. And that's when libertarianism kind of became a thing in the 1930s and 40s and grew out. But I more and more am becoming less, it's funny, I speak with conviction, but I don't have a lot of convictions. I'm very good at, I guess, breaking down faulty thinking and policies and this kind of stuff, but I'm far less confident in my ability to say what the right way would be. So more and more, I see myself kind of not really identifying with any political beliefs and seeing them more as times pass, like different time periods require different things. I speak very ill against socialism right now and kind of modern leftists, but then you read back to the early industrialist days where workers didn't have rights and stuff. Like there's a famous one with Rockefeller where his miners went on strike in this little mining town. I believe it was Ludlow, Ludlow. It's the Ludlow massacre. But his workers went on strike, and so he hired mercenaries to come in and just like kill them. And so that's what like the working way was for the worker back then, right? And so yeah, you kind of understand in that time period, in that context, in that world, then this idea of, say, unions or collective rights against the capitalists kind of makes sense. Like there was a massive imbalance in that time. But now you get to this point where you look at the modern world and say, even with Canada, and right now our government accounts for 44.7, like all levels of government, so municipal, provincial, and federal, but account for 44.7% of GDP. So 44.7% of every of the dollars that move around in our society are at one point coming from the government. That's an insane number. And so to me, I look at that and go, okay, the public sector has way too much power now. There's a power imbalance in that section. And so I don't really see myself as this rigid, I don't really have a rigid ideology that I go like, this is the right answer for all time periods. It's like, where are we? Like, what's going on in the world?
And what's required at that time. You know what? It's interesting. Jonathan articulated that beautifully, just as you did when he was on too. It says, depends what is required at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Like at this particular time, I personally wouldn't resonate with the Liberal government and the values that they hold.
Mm-hmm.
And I might resonate more with the Conservatives at this current time. But it's interesting to see how the ideology and the values of the party shifted, because like you just beautifully said, the Liberals at one point were the proponents of freedom of speech and some of the modern day conservative values that we would see today. So it's interesting to see how the shift has sort of happened, especially in Canada. And I feel that Liberals in particular have been hijacked by these radical leftists that have taken over the party, and that the reasonable Liberals should probably take that party back. But it seems to be working because they won again, which we'll talk about shortly. But to swing it back to you, how would you define modern day Liberals and how would you define modern day conservatives? What is the distinction?
Oh, I mean, I don't even think there really is one anymore. Like you look at just like, for instance, the doctrine of liberalism is the idea that the fundamental goal of politics should be the liberation of the individual from economic and state coercion. So that's like the fundamental principle of liberalism. And then you look at, say, the Liberal Party of Canada, or even, say, a lot of the more leftist, even outside of this, the establishments around the world in, say, whether it be France, the UK. America has its own portion as well. America is one of the few with like a strong counterculture. But you look at that, and all of these people are completely in it's complete state and corporate collusion in order to coerce the public. That's what we saw through COVID with the vaccines, that kind of stuff. Even when it comes to social media, and in the government, in the White House at the time, was messaging certain platforms and being like, why is this person still on? This journalist, Alex Berenson, who was talking about the vaccine data. And so, yeah, it's a complete inversion of what it means to even be a liberal. But then even too, like a lot of the conservatives, it's weird. It's kind of now, to be called a conservative, all you need to be is against the other party of what's happening, which the liberals that aren't really liberal. So if you're against that, now you're a conservative. But yeah, I don't know. Like I look back to certain time periods when, say, Lenny Bruce was getting jailed for swearing on stage, or when the church was trying to cancel certain musicians and all of this kind of stuff. And I look at that and I go, that's just the other side of the same coin. So I'm definitely not that either. So it's very strange. I think the words have kind of lost all meaning at this point.
That's interesting. So like during an election, from somebody like yourself who doesn't really resonate 100% with either party, what do you do?
Well, for me, it was very clear. I've said my biggest issue in Canada, voting-wise, is one, crime and corruption. And because I think the two go hand in hand. And because you can talk about, if public spending should be done in certain sectors and this and that. But if those sectors and the people that are in charge of these bureaucracies are they themselves corrupt, then giving more resources to these bureaucracies in order to fix whatever problem you think needs fixing, then that's not actually going to solve anything. And so for me, it was very easy because there was only one party that was talking about that, which was Polyev, talking about the bail reforms, that kind of stuff. Also, too, even one that flew under the radar for most people that I thought was actually a good policy was that he was going to make it so that conflict of interest violations, which happen super common in Ottawa, that they would actually have a fine attached to them. I think the number was $10,000, which, whatever, some of these people are millionaires, so it's not going to break the bank for them. But there's at least enough there where it starts to make people fear consequences a little bit, whereas at least right now it's just open season for who these ministers give contracts to. We recently saw, right, that Carney has 103 conflicts of interest with that he has to recuse himself from conversations with, and so that's a very high number, but all of these ministers have very similar issues. And so to me, the corruption aspect was number one. And yeah, he was the only one talking about it. But I don't know. I'm also not a purist in the sense where, or idealist in the sense where, and this is what I criticize the left about a lot, modern left at least, is that, oh, well, unless things are perfect, we should just burn it down and start over. Destabilizing societies is not a very good idea. And I even say this to a lot of people that, say are super disillusioned and listen to a lot of, say, our content about how corrupt things are. And they'll even say, you see it all the time. Even if it's not our content, you see this sentiment online all the time about people, pushing for revolution or this or that.
Yes.
I think a lot of it is just large talk, but I don't know, you go look at, I have no romanticism towards that kind of stuff. You even go look at throughout history, whether it be the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, all of these times where the people, quote unquote, stood up. It didn't necessarily get better for them. A lot of the times it just spurred utter chaos. And so for me, even if if things would be 1% better in one direction, I'll take it. Yeah. I even look at that on an individual level. It's like, hey, if you can improve your life a little bit, that's still a big win. And so unless you can't just have everything to be perfect, then yeah, you shouldn't burn it all down either.
Well, it's like if you're a proponent of smaller government, then you definitely wouldn't be voting for the Liberal government. Because they're just inflated. The bureaucracy, like you mentioned, is so big. And the only avenue forward, which would be the official opposition, which would be the Conservatives. But the power is maybe not in overthrowing the government. In my opinion, the power is at the voting box. And, Canadians showed up. 69% of Canadians showed up to vote, the most since 1993. But there's still that 30% gap where Canadians aren't voting. Do you think people should stay politically engaged? Should they be paying attention to politics as an average Canadian citizen? You personally at one point weren't, and then a travesty happened, and then you did. What do you think for the average Canadian? Should they be dialed in?
Yeah, I think there's a responsibility for it, right? Like, if anybody was to ever threaten people's freedoms of voting, everyone would quickly go into an uproar, right?
Yeah.
But every freedom comes with a responsibility. So if you have the freedom to vote, then you have the responsibility to be an informed voter. And so I definitely see this issue a lot where, this is kind of one of my main gripes with democracy in general, and not that I lobby against it, because Churchill had a great quote about democracy is the worst system that's except for all the others that have been tried, and so maybe it's the least bad system, but I think my biggest problem with, actually, to quote Churchill again, he once said, the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. And I think that's entirely true, is because, and you know what, the thing that bothers me more about it isn't necessarily that people are uninformed, because I can understand why some people take the ignorance is bliss route, or it's not even a matter of whether they're interested in it or would, but they just 3 kids, they're working 50 hours a week they just can't. I understand that. I think what bothers me, though, is when people have very strong, ill-informed opinions. If somebody's just genuinely aloof and just says, I don't pay much attention to it, and they don't really care all that much, that's one thing. But it's the people that don't know anything and talk extremely and are ready to ruin relationships over it, all of this, and even say during the COVID stuff, that's exactly what I saw was the average person just becoming okay being a complete authoritarian and over politics and trying to ruin lives, but having absolutely no logical basis to stand on.
One-dimensional way of thinking. They were getting their information from one source, and that was the mainstream media that was perpetuated by funding and overall corruption in a one world type of mentality. How much do you attribute like the lack of, because that's where I kind of feel that people pull back, they don't want to vote, they don't trust the system. There's this lack of faith in the institutions and the anti-establishment sentiment that's running through Canada and the West. How much do you attribute COVID to the result, that result being ultimately people don't trust the institutes, the system, the experts, the medical industries? How much do you attribute that to what happened?
Oh, almost all of it, at least getting that ball rolling.
Yes.
I think other issues have definitely contributed to that, but it was, I think, the kind of the dam breaking, essentially. But yeah, I mean, until there is accountability for that, then I'm going to be in that boat where I'm not going to trust these institutions at all until there's actual major kickback. But I also think we're in a very crazy time period in just like, I think we're in a once in every 100 years type of time period. Really? where when things change.
In what way? Like a transformational?
Yeah, whether it be technologically, also politically, even industry-wise. I also think, even globally, like why we're seeing so many conflicts take off. The world order is changing. Who has the most power on the world stage? Technology, AI, all of it. There's so many different things changing at once that I actually don't know if this past system, if we're going to, I think something completely new is going to be built, and I don't know what that is. I think there's kind of a blind spot. It would be like asking somebody in 1938 what the world's going to look like in a decade. You would have no idea. But I think, things are going to change a lot, and I think a lot of these old models and these institutions that people no longer trust, that because a lot of people don't have trust in the government, but it's also everything that extends out from that as well, like media, academia, all of these other institutions and social institutions as well have lost credibility. And so I don't think it's going to be a matter of tweaking those institutions anymore and trying to reform them and make them good again or whatever. It's going to just be, there's going to be something new that gets built out of this technological revolution that actually just makes that old model, these old institutions that we have been, that we've now become disillusioned with. I think they're just going to, become relics.
I'd like to think that, like, if the less government involvement in these institutions, media, social media, and these types of things, it could sort of restore faith in the way the functions of society should work. Like, would you agree? Because I feel like some of these institutions are somewhat like academia, for example, you brought up 6-to-1 professors are liberal versus conservative. Like, it's an overarching number that is overwhelmingly influencing the youth and the students. And that's why we see the protests and stuff. But a lot of them, it's like it's an arm reach for the government. And I feel that the less involvement of the government in these institutions in our lives is better overall.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a central theme, even throughout all of the stories that, like, whether it be Lord of the Rings, the Harry Potter ones, all of these stories that resonate deeply throughout culture, they all speak of a very similar narrative, which the centralization of power is extremely dangerous, right? That's the ring in Lord of the Rings. It's the Infinity Gauntlet in Avengers. Like, and
that's why those movies do so well,
right? And you look at what do the good people do in all of those movies and these stories that we've been telling ourselves is that, they dismantle the power. Whether it's they take apart the Infinity Gauntlet, whether they cast the ring into the fire, they don't wield it for themselves. And so, I think that's definitely good on a very deep level. I think that's good. I think the centralization of power is very dangerous. But that's what's interesting about this AI world and the technological advancements and the changes that are happening is I do think it goes one of two ways. And I've actually even heard Ray Dalio, one of the big finance guys, talk about this as well. And I think he's correct in the sense where this revolution is going to either lead to completely making those institutions like government irrelevant, and it's going to kind of create like an anarchic world, or it's going to completely centralize power and give them a large degree of control as well. And you see them trying to make this play. That's essentially the fight that's happening right now.
I think it's, if I'm coming from a government standpoint, especially if you're a tyrannical government, like most of them that we do see, I don't see how they don't want to get involved in AI and have some sort of regulations or government involvement in it. I don't. It's too powerful.
Oh, yeah. I can't remember the guy's name, but even, you saw, I think it was about a year ago, he came from the NSA, and then he was on the board of directors at OpenAI. And, so you definitely see them start getting into that. Like, I think, and this is what I've come to realize more and more about the world, is that at certain levels, there's almost zero distinction. There's no clear boundaries between organized crime, business, and the government. And so you see these entities just completely working together, and there's almost like a network that aligns between them all that ends up kind of becoming the people that make the decisions, I guess.
Yeah, I know. It's unfortunate, the cliche that the politicians are liars and stuff like that seems to be proving itself true. And it's unfortunate because I think there needs to be some sort of structure in a society, but you would hope that honesty would be of the forefront. And you always get that, right?
Yeah, it's in short supply, though, unfortunately.
That's exactly right. I don't know if I think, is that the way it's always been? I feel like possibly in some way or another. I think it boils down to pick your poison. That's what I always say. And speaking of poison, let's jump over to Canadian politics for a second and talk about what's been going on here, because I love your guys' takes on it. You and Jonathan are doing a great job, as I said. So I'd love to get your opinion on just sort of open up the segment here. What is your take on how the last Canadian federal election sort of unfolded, and what is your thoughts on how everything was working?
Oof, I think it's pretty crazy. This goes to a good, point about what we were talking about with the average person and democracy, especially in Canada, where just very uninformed as to why things are happening, what's actually happening. I like to do this because I don't think many people see this picture about the last two Canadian elections. And so actually I'll take it all the way back to 2021.
Snap election? Was that the snap election?
Yeah. That kind of came out of nowhere. Everyone was like, we were
millions of dollars, and
and we were in the middle of a pandemic that was essentially putting lockdown into your home, but all of a sudden this election gets called out of nowhere. Why are we doing this?
Massive lineups, people turned around, left.
So what happened there was, just in leading up to that election, there was a massive scandal at the National Winnipeg Biolab, which is our level 4 biolab. So it's got the most dangerous pathogens. There's actually very few labs even in the world with this level of security clearance. And it was found that the Winnipeg lab was shipping viruses, the two were Ebola and Nipah, to the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China, where, they were doing the gain of function research on COVID. Actually, really interesting too. I believe it was Cambridge. There was a study done that found it was like there was cross contamination between the Nipah virus that we sent China and somebody that had contracted COVID in the early days. So it was likely. So what I'm pointing at here is that not that we sent them COVID or that there's nothing concrete linking that to Canada at this point. And this is all laid out in a parliamentary report titled "The Nexus Between National Security and Science" for anyone who wants to dig deeper into it. But we were definitely collaborating with them on the research that created COVID. Again, not necessarily COVID itself, but the research, the more general.
Was that before Fauci literally testified?
It was the exact same program that Fauci was funding.
Yeah, which he lied about, and there was no accountability.
Right, and so we were sending them bioterrorism-grade viruses to do this research on. So they were, funding this research.
What's the purpose of that anyway? Like, what?
It's military. Like, so bioweapons are definitely a thing that we prepare for. Just like countries have nuclear arms programs and this kind of stuff, and trying to create the best weapons. They also have bioweapons programs.
Fucking crazy.
Yeah. And so we were letting the Chinese Communist Party's military take samples from our Winnipeg lab and work on them and do this gain of function research and make them more deadly and more transmissible and essentially weaponize them more and more. And so I don't know, like, I have yet to figure out the question of that, like, why. That's a very good question. Why was the Liberal government under Trudeau at the time? I believe Mark Holland was the minister that was overlooking these labs. And, why were you? CSIS had been giving them warnings for years upon years that China's military was working out of this lab and had access to this lab, and that two scientists in particular, Shengge Che and Kadang Chang.
I don't know how you remember that.
Said it a few times. The pronunciation could be totally wrong too. Nobody's ever corrected me, but they had warnings. The Liberal government was getting warnings saying these two scientists are compromised by China's military and they're collaborating with them, and they did nothing for years upon years upon years. And so this is leading into the 2021 election. This scandal broke that this was happening at the Winnipeg lab, and then the Speaker of the House, who was Anthony Rota at the time, the one that got thrown under the bus with the Nazi applause scandal, he compelled Trudeau's government to come forward with documents about what was happening at the Winnipeg lab, just saying, like, you need to bring this to Parliament and let us figure out what was going on here, because clearly this was breach of protocol, national security issue. And then Trudeau and the Liberals sued the Speaker of the House for that. I don't know what happened there I think that lawsuit ended up getting more or less thrown out. But then right after that is when they called the snap election. So that snap election shut down Parliament in 2021 in this investigation that was going to happen into the Winnipeg labs. So the 2021 snap election that came out of nowhere, that everyone was like, why are we doing this right now? Was so that they could bury the Winnipeg lab scandal, because it just completely wiped Parliament. Because we're going to an election now.
That would have been probably detrimental to the Liberal Party. I thought they were doing it because they saw some provinces doing it and getting a majority government. So I thought that's what they were attempting.
No, it looks like the main thing there was that, and they even talk about this in that parliamentary report, that like all the lawsuit, the election, all of it. It was the main function was to bury this scandal. And then so fast forward another 4 years, and in October, Parliament freezes. So this is October 2024. Parliament freezes because there was an investigation into the Green Slush Fund.
Yes.
So this was where it was starting to come out that the Attorney General, Hogue, found that out of this $1 billion fund that gets an allotment to go towards green energy, to fund research in sustainable development, that at first the number was like 100 million or something she found, where the contracts of going to liberal friendly firms, so 10% of the fund was just getting diverted into companies that were friendly with liberal ministers. Again, back to the corruption issue.
Big time.
And then it got worse and worse the further that the attorney general dug into it. It eventually got to the point where there was $330 million in bad contracting found, unethical contracting found. And then so they started compelling the Liberal government under Trudeau at the time, you've got to bring these documents forward to Parliament and allow us to debate these in a public setting. What was happening with this fund? The people deserve to know. What happens there? Well, okay, October, they freeze Parliament for a month. Then we went into Christmas break for a month. Then Trudeau, once it comes off on Christmas break, it looks like Jagmeet is going to finally grow a backbone and out Trudeau.
Withdraw from the coalition.
So he resigns.
Yes.
Then they hold a Liberal leadership election, which is, again, during all this time, Parliament is frozen, right? So that they can't dig into this green slush fund. Then they do the Liberal election. Then they do the general federal election between the Liberals and the Conservatives. And then by the time we come back, this is like 8 months have gone by from the initial parliamentary freeze in October to the end of the election. So both the 2021 and 2025 election were their primary reason for doing them was covering up massive scandals, being the Winnipeg lab in the Green Slush Fund.
Could that be brought up again to be disputed?
I don't know why Polyev and the Conservatives aren't talking about this kind of stuff, and this is where I've kind of grown impatient with them, is being like they're still, playing the role of opposition in talking about, say, whatever just happens recently in the news. But I'm like, You've got these are massive scandals, especially for me, just like the Winnipeg lab one. Like that's massive. That can't just get brushed under a rug.
How many times has that happened?
Right. So as far as I know, like Jonathan and I of Blender are like one of the few people that are trying to keep this narrative of things alive, because I believe it's the correct narrative of why these elections unfolded, how they did. But I don't see I don't see the media talking about this stuff anymore. It's kind of like as if it was just this isolated time period of something that happened, and that story is dead now. It's like, no, that's still much alive.
It's mismanagement of Canadians' dollars.
Yeah.
And that's very important to dig into. And I think you're 100% right. You guys are correct. That is something that needs to be visited. We need to understand what happened there, because we've seen the Liberal Party and Justin Trudeau in particular get away with multiple ethics violations. Mm-hmm. And it's also attributed to why people lost faith in the institutions. Mm-hmm. We see these guys get grilled and questioned in Parliament, and what happens? Nothing. They don't even have to answer the question, actually, technically speaking. They dance around for the response. It goes back to the official opposition. They reply. They ask again. Then they dance around again for another couple minutes, and nothing gets done. That's a gong show, in my opinion. You're not actually getting anything done.
No.
If you allow, that's where the Speaker of the House, I would think, in my mind, as a reasonable Canadian, that they should hold them to account, and you have to address it directly.
Yeah, they should. The fact that that there isn't larger investigations happening into this should concern everybody, because even too outside of that, you go to the RCMP. You even just look at, why isn't the RCMP independently doing investigations into this kind of stuff? Well, you look at how they've been handled, whether it's both RCMP and CSIS, they've become both extremely politicized at this point. And so, there was the one case out east. This one I don't know the details on in and out, but I remember that the head of the RCMP commissioner, there was a mass shooting out east. This was about 5 or 6 years ago, I believe. And they, the way that they handled the investigation and allowed the information to come out, they were collaborating with the Liberal Party in order to make sure that it would help them.
Yeah.
And so you go, okay, the RCMP's investigations are completely politicized at this point. And so I think to me, that's why, again, corruption is the number one issue for
I
me.
think so.
And I don't even care what side of the political aisle they're on. 100% there's conservatives that do the same thing, all of this. But I do find it very interesting that if there was conservative ministers, if we had even a fraction of the amount of evidence and actual hard information that we have of conservatives doing the stuff that we've had of liberals doing over the past decade, it would be nonstop in the media.
And that in itself tells me something about the way the government system is run up. Mm-hmm. It's favored to an obvious side. The hypocrisy is evident. Mm-hmm. And it's unfair, it's unjust, and it's corruption, blatant corruption. But speaking of the conservatives, let's talk about them for a second. Pierre Poilievre and the conservatives lost a 20-point lead in that election. It was a big decrease in the amount of support that they had leading up to that election. What do you attribute that to? Do you think what are some errors do you think that they made, that Pierre made? Is he still the guy to do the job for the Conservative Party? What's your take on that?
I don't really see a viable replacement.
Me too.
I do see it also hard in the sense of, it's hard when you're still, the by-election is coming up for him, so he'll likely have a seat in Parliament again soon, but it's kind of hard when you when you lost your riding in the election in Carleton. Now, I think, what happened there with the long ballot and all of that kind of stuff is obvious attacks on him there. But I think two things. The Donald Trump factor was massive.
Huge.
In the election. That single-handedly won the Liberals the election, and they played it perfectly. As far as political strategy goes,
very well done.
People call the Liberals idiots and all this kind of stuff. You go, they're geniuses. They're evil.
They were almost decimated.
Yeah, but the fact that they were able to turn that around is astonishing. And so, they did that with the help of Trump for sure. But then also, Poilievre, I think, to exactly what I was saying there, where he took his foot off the gas on these scandals, because people wrongly criticize Poilievre when it comes to, say, stuff like the Winnipeg lab and because they'll accuse him of, say, being, how's the saying go? The two wings are of the same bird, right? And so they'll say it's like a uniparty, and that it's that the conservatives are really just like false opposition. A lot of the more conspiracy-minded folk, but they'll falsely criticize him for not bringing up stuff like the Winnipeg lab. But he did at the time when that scandal was happening. He was the one really starting to, and same with the Green Slush Fund. He was on the gas about those things. I think that's why his popularity was so high, and in part why the Liberals and Trudeau's was so low, is because people were hearing about these scandals that are massive. And once the election got called, it went less of, I'm going on the attack against this other party, against the Liberals, and it became more about, and I'm not even saying this is bad, but it's just, I think it's why he lost the election, is that he then went, here's why I'm the proper leader at this time. Started trying to play the family man. He took off the aggressive approach. And again, that's a strategy. But I think the winning, he started going hard against Trump and all of this kind of stuff. And so he essentially became liberal light. Like, he was like, I'm going to try to out-liberal the Liberals in this campaign. And I think that's what lost it, was going soft. But had he laid on these scandals and said, nope, this is the same party that, did the Green Slush Fund. This is the same party, the same ministers, the same team around Carney, and really just hammered in those points, then I think it would have been completely different.
Possibly mismanaged and misdirected by his campaign managers and some background staff, because a lot of people obviously critique him for not doing the podcasts, getting the word out. But I think I'm of the same opinion. I think he should have really went on the gas.
Yeah.
And he should have maybe possibly met with Trump. Mm-hmm. That's the main sticking point, which, by the way, nobody talks about anymore. They don't talk about it as much anymore, about how Trump is a threat to democracy. The media is not talking about that anymore. It's not as relevant or prevalent to the topics that Canadians are discussing. It was really used, it was weaponized for Canadians, and they fell for it. They fell for it big time. But that's also a testament to how the Liberals run the media and basically control. It was a strategically very good move, and they control everything. But they own everything. They run everything. So it's very unfortunate. I think to lose a 20-point lead is very sad to see. It's very unfortunate. But he should have maybe stepped on that gas a little bit harder. He should have went harder, man. He should have went a little bit harder, because now we're in a situation where, Mark Carney is running it, and he was the refurbished and new liberal person in there. But like, just looking at his first sort of runway of leadership, what is your take on his performance so far?
I think front facing, he's a lot better, in the sense where I don't think he's better morally than Trudeau, but he's definitely more intelligent, and he comes off as more of a pragmatist than he does in ideological zealot like Trudeau does. I think Trudeau was strictly rhetoric and, sunny ways, my friends, and equality and diversity. He had the rhetoric and literally no thought behind it. I think he was an empty vessel. But Carney is definitely a lot more intelligent. Now, I don't think that makes him necessarily a better person. I think, he was even crafting a lot of the policies and ideas, especially economically, for Trudeau. But it is refreshing, at least, not to have a joke. I'm not even a big fan of anything he's done in particular so far, but it's nice not being like an international laughing stock.
Trudeau definitely became that 10 years, Liam. That's quite a bit of time. And quite a bit of damage too.
But then again, there's almost a little bit of danger with that, in the same sense where it can become very disarming to people. And so, okay, great, we've got the level-headed politician back in, and I can go back to not paying attention.
It's the same party door, right? It's the same party,
right? So there is kind of that danger with that. But I mean, I think, personally, I just know too much about Carney and his backstory and the circles that he runs in when it comes to these global financial networks to really give him any praise, because even too, like, the cost of living crisis that everyone is experiencing right now, there's a crazy report done by the U.S. government, the House Judiciary. If you just search U.S. House Judiciary climate cartel, it's a report they did where they found that these massive financial companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, Brookfield, etc., these institutional investors, they formed, and Carney is mentioned in this report 6 times. So they formed what was called the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. And this was financial institutions coming together, and they had 130 trillion. It was either 120 or 130 trillion dollars in assets. That's more than the entire global GDP, annual GDP for the entire world. So that's how much money these people are managing in this alliance. And so their whole plan was, when it comes to the green energy and development stuff, is, and this is what it outlines in the Climate Cartel report, is they were implementing something they called demand management. So they said, okay, the technology isn't coming along quick enough. The solar panels, the wind, the renewables, this isn't taking off in the way that we thought it would. So, but we still need emissions to come down. So, seeing as we don't have the technology, we actually need to just limit the amount of consumption. So you started having them essentially, and I'm oversimplifying things again, but this is the main crux of the report, which is that the demand management was, their idea was, well, we can just make things, we can hold back supply so that prices rise. The corporations will make the same amount. People can't afford as much, so they'll consume less, therefore emissions down, good. So they looked at the cost of living crisis as a way to reduce consumption and emissions. And so a lot of this, and I'm not saying it's just Mark Carney, but that, like, he's at the head of the table. There's all these others,
proponent,
but he's a big proponent of it. Yeah. And he actually was the UN climate change envoy, right? And so he was the head of this global, the GFANZ is what they call it, that Global Financial Alliance. And so he's definitely a major player and all that. So, when I see him come in and talk about, okay, this is what we're going to do for the economy, but I know what he's been doing for the last 10 years, I think they're just rebranding a lot of the same ideas. They're just repackaging it, but the goal is the same. And so, yeah, I definitely have a very, very negative view, but the one thing that I can kind of, get behind is the fact that we're not just a constant laughing stock.
And which is, I think if you're not just like a whole, I don't want to be anti-liberal or there's people that are just anti-conservative. If you're looking at it fairly like that, you can say that for sure. But just coming out the gate, what has he done? Like the crime is still extremely dangerous. There's been no reform on crime yet. They say that that's one of the things that they're planning to do, but their safety minister doesn't even know the laws, the regulations.
Yeah.
So it's quite humorous.
So did you see the one with him recently?
I saw it
came out a week ago. Yeah, I covered that. That was wild. He was also, so the public safety minister, Gary Anandasundagri.
I couldn't pronounce his name. We talked about it, and I'm like, Gary, I'm going to say Gary, or Gary, whatever the first letter was. That's all I'm saying.
It took a while for me to draw that. I had to get it like phonetically spelled out and be like, Gary Anandasundagri. 6 syllables, man, for a name? Like, no, you get 2.
And that's
you get 2 syllables in your name. He also, it was as recent as 2023, he was lobbying the government to accept a man that was a propagandist for the Tamil Tigers, which is a militant terrorist group out of Sri Lanka. And so our public safety minister has multiple times vouched for people that are paid by terrorist organizations to become Canadians. And you go, just the fact that like the irony of him being our public safety minister is so fun. You go through this entire cabinet, man. There's so many like this. Evan Solomon is our minister of AI. During the election, he retweeted a meme that somebody had AI generated of Mark Carney stepping off of a bus, and because the painting on the Mark Carney bus had liberal on it before, but somebody AI'd it. It said retard bus.
Yeah, and he tweeted it.
And he tweeted that out, and that's now our minister of AI is a guy that's retweeting AI memes.
Stephen Guilbeault literally charged for these types of folks that like stand in front of vehicles and these climate protests. He climbed the CPR at one point. He literally has a criminal past. These are your government officials.
Yeah, and so the irony of there's at least if you can laugh at the irony, it doesn't it's not so bad.
It's not so detrimental. But a little bit more of just Carney here. Just I look at. Just last year before we wrap up about the 1 hour mark, but I look at Carney and I look at the relationship between him and Trump, and we've talked about this before too, Dean. I highly suspect that Trump actually wanted him to win, that he wanted Mark Carney to win. He said it'd be easier to deal with a liberal, which people took it in many different ways, but I think they have a prior relationship. What is your take on their relationship and sort of the failed negotiations of tariffs, which take us to present day, which he's basically committing to, I think, at the beginning of August to implement tariffs on Canada, which one of the main sticking points of the election, like we just unpacked so eloquently. But what is your take on the relationship and the failed negotiations of the tariffs?
Well, I mean, he did say it himself. Trump did say it would be easier to deal with a liberal, but he also there's a history financially between the two of them, mainly connected to his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. And now Jonathan knows more about this than I did. He was the one that covered it for us at Blender, but he did a whole 6 or 7 minute video on it. But more or less, the Mark Carney and Brookfield bailed out Jared Kushner for $1 billion for a piece of real estate in New York. And so there's definitely financial ties between Trump and Carney on that front, that one in particular. And this is very common knowledge. You can go read about it. It's Fifth Avenue, 666 Fifth Avenue, funny number.
I'm tired.
But But yeah, so there definitely seems to be some alignment there, but I don't know. It's hard to get a read on Trump, and that's something he does strategically, right? Is he doesn't. You can actually, and I've read Art of the Deal, his book, but part of it is definitely the kind of not letting the other players know what your cards are, and so that's something he does very well. Whether he's financially intertwined with Carney and their buddies, that's one thing. Whether he has leverage one way or another on Carney, that's another. Whether he's serious about actually bringing Canada under the banner of America and thinks that, maybe the Liberals are going to keep sinking the ship and it's going to make it easier to take them over, that's another thing. It's hard for me to say on that one. I don't really know what the motive or intentions are there.
Mm-hmm. And then the tariffs. Do you think what was your take on Trump and the tariffs? Do you think because especially with the Epstein stuff that's been happening, but like the support and that seems to be very divisive right now. Like, do you think that's a smart play?
We'll see how it plays out. I look at the tariffs similar to economic. They're an economic lever in warfare. Like when you're a country and you want to get something done, and when you want to make something happen outside of your borders, you have two levers you can pull, which is, well, I guess technically three, but the two main ones are economic and military that actually cause significant consequences one way or another. The third would be diplomacy, like you can kind of run a PR campaign against them and that kind of thing, but it's not as effective as economic or military because there's real consequences to that. But so he's essentially militarizing the American economy. And I look at it very similar to wars and conflicts in general. Like, you can't really know for sure how things are going to turn out until the dominoes have fallen. Like, even if you look at, say, like Vietnam in America at the time versus the Viet Cong, everybody would have been like, oh, America's going to steamroll Vietnam. But they ended up looking like fools over there and couldn't actually achieve their military goals. So they definitely didn't win that war. But so back to your point about the tariffs, I think it's very similar in the sense where he started the conflict now, but as to how it'll play off, I think there's endless amounts of variables to consider in that respect. But I think he's definitely using them. The main reason for them that I see him using them for is to leverage at the negotiating table in Canada. So he already got rid of the digital services tax, which was going to take revenue off of all the big streamers in the American companies.
Carney said he was going to get rid of it inevitably anyway.
And so he used tariffs to do that. And then the same thing now, he's starting to eye supply management, which is our dairy quotas. So we have it so that we have really large tariffs on American dairy products. And so I think he's going to start trying to ease those off now so that American companies can start selling here. Or more freely, at least. They still can, but there's just heavy quotas on them. But so, yeah, I think the tariffs are multi-use in that sense. And then I think there's also some people that think it's more of a lasting economic strategy for them. I see them more as kind of a weapon than a long-term economic strategy. But yeah, who knows? That kind of stuff. When it comes to like predicting the future, how things will play out, I am so agnostic when it comes to that kind of stuff.
It's hard to see how things are going to unfold, and he's only the first year in, so we'll see how that unfolds. But more particularly, I hope Canada is in an optimistic state soon. Because I'm not too happy with the way everything's kind of unfolded thus far. I was hoping for change, but the Canadians voted, they spoke, and they used their right to vote, and that's what they voted for. So we'll see how things sort of unfold. But just to tie a bow on everything, I have a final segment on Couple Casuals podcast, which I call Salute. I give an opportunity to the guests to salute, end us off, give us a cheers, whatever it is that you want to end us off with, words of encouragement, some insight. You seem really good with your quotes. Maybe end us off with a quote. Hey, end us off here, Liam.
Yeah, you know what? I think about this more and more, and this is how I've been trying to live my life, and I think it's actually the complete antithesis of what we see play out in a lot of the public sphere and this corruption and stuff that I talk about. Dude, I think more and more people just hardlined stuck to their conscience, that voice inside of their head that judges them. If they just did not stray from that at all, we'd be in a pretty good spot, whether you take it as more of a religious slant, or even you go back to guys like Socrates. Socrates said that he had a daemon, is what he called it, not a demon, but a daemon that was in his head, and he's like, I've never not listened. I've always listened to that voice, and my life's turned out pretty all right. And so I think that's definitely that's I'm going more and more down that hole of
That's
just
well said.
Screw whatever the social status is, all of that kind of stuff. Gain the respect of the of your conscience.
Yeah, the inclination of your gut. Trust the gut. Trust the voice in your head. I like that, because how many times you look back at situations and you're like, I fucking knew it.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Well said, man. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you taking the
Thank
time.
you, Taylor.
Best of luck to you and Jonathan. I'll be following the journey closely, and it's been amazing so far. So I look forward to more.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure chatting.
I appreciate it, man, and I appreciate all you guys. Until next time, I love nobody else. Ciao.